It is so shallow. I was watching the director's cut and I was like, is the director's cut just loads of scenes where they're talking about like your name being remembered throughout history over and over again?
Don't get me wrong, it's good and it's shit at the same time.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of fun.
I was listening to a podcast on the Trojan Wars on my way over here, and one of the historians says, they only talked briefly about the Brad Pitt film, but he says it is literally the worst film he's ever seen. And I was only after watching it last night and listening to it, so I do tend to agree with that. I don't know what it is that this film is doing.
That's brilliant.
It's so funny. Like, there's things I really liked about it, and there's things I really didn't like about it.
Yeah, right. Are we good to go? Yeah.
Yeah, we're good to go.
We're recording. Definitely recording.
Oh, excellent! Straight in.
You got some Trojan history?
I've got some Trojan history, but this is the thing. There is not very much of any grounding there. There's a site that they believe's Troy, and there's lots of different layers to that site. But the Trojan Wars comes from... All this comes from the Iliad, and there's not much in the Iliad. The Trojan horse isn't in the Iliad.
Really?
Yeah, it's...
We'll
Oh, shit, nice. Okay,
we'll learn.
Brilliant.
We'll learn.
Okay. I thought it was. No, it's in Homer's Odyssey.
So... Tom, you're just back from Italy, big shooter. Yes.
Yeah, I was in Cortona for a week. I was doing a little bit of location-based research.
Nice.
It was fucking beautiful. It was really, really nice. The food was incredible, as you would imagine. I discovered a new version of pasta. It's called Pici. They only do it in Tuscany, as I've learned trying to get it in the Italian shop here.
Yeah.
How does it vary from pasta?
It doesn't vary from pasta. What I mean to say is like, it's like spaghetti, but really thick.
Like a different type.
Yeah, it's like the thickest spaghetti you've ever seen. It's fucking incredible.
Does it have a hole in the middle?
No, there's no hole.
That's
I had that in Rome.
that's good. What's that called?
You're going to tell me what it was. That's
no,
good.
No. There's a name for it.
I love Italy.
Yeah,
the motherland. I love Italian people. Just everything about it. Like, if I were to be any other kind of guy, I'd want to be an Italian guy. Like,
really sexually aggressive?
No, I'd be one of those like really fat tan guys you'd see outside a vineyard, like peeling plum tomatoes into like a basket, you know.
Bucatini. It's hollow spaghetti.
That's the one.
We had a meal at a restaurant that was used as a set in Succession. It was absolutely incredible. Really cool. It was on like a little roof terrace. And I also saw Gwyneth Paltrow while I was there. Did I mention I was in a place called Cortona? Did I say that already? Sorry,
you said.
I didn't get very much sleep last night, so I'm kind of like, my brain's not working too good today. But anyway,
what was she at?
I don't know, just fucking going out for dinner or something with her younger boyfriend.
Oh, aye.
Probably doing some Goop advertisements or something.
Filled with jade eggs.
What's the crack with her?
Oh, she sells candles and face creams that have traces of her lady parts.
Does she actually? I thought it was just candles.
It's a lot as
What's
far
it-
as
Jesus
I haven't
Christ,
looked into it too heavily.
What's it called? Like, what's the brand
Goop.
name of it? Goop?
Goop.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't sound nice.
I think
They also peddle loads of like bad health advice. Like, I think one of their ones, like from years and years ago, was about how healthy coconut oil is to cook with. It's not. It's got like more saturated fat than lard. But they were saying because it had like 15%, what are they called? Multi-chain triglycerides, which is like really good for you. Like, you can buy MCT oil, like an extract. That's really good for you. But in coconut oil, it is not, because it's like 85% saturated fat.
You know, Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop candles. Like, I mean, you wouldn't want to come back home from a long day at work and your house smelling like Gwyneth Paltrow's Sarlacc pit. Anyway.
Oh yeah, just one other thing that kind of like leads us nicely into the episode. Apparently, according to legend, Cortona is known as the mother of Troy and grandmother of Rome. And it's said that the hero Dardanus left Cortona to found Troy.
Nice.
So there we go.
Very good.
It's a nice little lead-in for you.
Before you came to Sparta, I was a ghost.
Come with me.
Let's settle this war in the old manner.
Imagine a king who fights his own battles. Wouldn't that be a sight? What have you done now?
Tonight was the fisherman's wife.
I should have listened to you.
Peace is for the women.
I've watched them dying, and there's nothing glorious about it. Nothing poetic.
I am Ajax, breaker of stones! Look upon me and destroy!
thinks he's untouchable behind his high walls. He thinks the sun god will protect him.
And how many battalions does the sun god command?
Do not mock the gods.
War is young men dying and old men talking. You know this. Ignore the politics.
Bird signs. You want to plan a strategy based on bird signs. Yesterday the Greeks underestimated us. We should not return the favor.
Spare the innocent.
Nobody's innocent. Nobody.
Well, Colonels Cornheads, welcome back to the Popcorn Head podcast with your host Gavin Wilton. Back once again, two guys who are no stranger to a bit of paraphilia on the regular, Mr. Rory Moore and Mr. Tom Brady. If you don't know what paraphilia
What the hell is paraphilia?
It's basically like getting like choked out and all like, you know, like your man in Kill Bill, Bill from Kill Bill. You know what happened there.
This is like very localized, but there was a law that was passed recently, and it was like if you've ever choked someone during sex, that could be a crime. And I was like, tell me you don't fuck without telling me you don't fuck.
Anyway, welcome back, guys. Think of this sort of as season 2 of the pod. We're back and we're ready to rip it up. And today we're looking at Wolfgang Petersen's Troy, released in 2004 and written by David Benioff, best known for his work as co-creator, writer, and director on Game of Thrones.
Oh, I knew I recognized that cunt from somewhere.
Yeah. The film, it's loosely based on Homer's The Iliad, which is an ancient Greek poem set during the Trojan War, which narrates a period of the decade-long siege of Troy, in which the Greek hero Achilles refuses to fight after having a dispute with Agamemnon. The film also takes influence from Homer's The Odyssey, and this guy called Quintus Smyrnaeus's Post-Homerica, you call it.
What?
Yeah, post-Homerica. And it covers the period from the end of the Iliad to the end of the Trojan War. So basically like the final, whatever, third of the film, you know?
Yeah.
So before
But it's all fucking like legend. Like you cannot be treating that as a historical document.
Yeah. So before we get into the film, we'll take a wee look at sort of the sources and the context behind it all. And the best place to start would be with Homer and the Iliad. So Homer was this ancient Greek poet born sometime in the 8th century BC, and he is the presumed author of the Iliad and the Odyssey, two epic poems that would serve basically as the foundations of ancient Greek literature. Next to nothing is known about the actual life of Homer, but tradition does hold that he was this blind bard, and modern scholars generally agree that he composed the Iliad. Although he may not have been the creator of the story, it could have stemmed from the oral traditions of storytelling from that time, and it's thought that he at very least inspired the composition of the Odyssey. That's just how ancient these works are. There's no way of knowing for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard arguments that Shakespeare was like a collection of people writing under one name. So like it's entirely possible.
About Shakespeare not being Shakespeare.
Really?
I mean, I watched a really, really in-depth YouTube documentary. I got myself convinced, and then went on and had a wee look, and it seems like everybody discredits this.
Right.
It really is your man from Stafford-upon-Avon. And it does seem the most likely, but it's not definite. You know?
Very quickly, there's that church in America who think he's black.
Oh yeah,
well, they think everyone's black.
It's what do they call it?
We were talking about
the Israelites. They call themselves.
Oh, the Black Israelites. They think they're like a lost tribe of Israel, or like they think they're like the real Jews or something. Here, I found out recently that apparently there's like a strain in Protestantism that thinks that they're one of the lost tribes of Israel as well. It's very funny.
Would not surprise me.
So anyway, the Iliad is set during the Trojan War, and the Odyssey takes place after, and it follows Odysseus, who was the king of Ithaca, and he's best known for taking 10 years to go home to his wife after already spending 10 years at the siege of Troy. I think that's very funny. Just like he's like away to like war, being like, fuck, I'm away to get the head shot here, get away from her. But yeah,
let's just say he took the scenic route home.
But yeah, both poems, they were incredibly influential all the way back from the classical age, and to this day they remain the most important poems of the European tradition. In terms of Greek culture, they helped shape things things like education, ideals of heroism, glory, honor, and Plato would even refer to Homer as the man who taught Greece. So the Iliad, it takes place near the end of the Trojan War, depicting the most significant events of the 10-year siege as Agamemnon and Achilles basically fall out. So who are these guys? You ask. Well, according to Greek mythology, Achilles was known for being the greatest of all the Greek warriors. He was the son of a famous Argonaut and king called Peleus and a famous sea nymph called Nereid. Legend also claims that Achilles was invulnerable all over his body except for one of his heels because, according to the myth, his mother dipped him in the river Styx as an infant, but she had him at one heel and didn't touch the water. Maybe she just like got her nails did or something, and that left the heel vulnerable. And that's of course where the term Achilles heel comes from, and our Achilles tendon is also named after that myth. Then we have Agamemnon, the king of Mycenae, who commanded the Greek army during the Trojan War. The name Agamemnon basically means very steadfast, which reflects his like strong character and leadership as a commander.
It's like Man of Steel.
Yeah. So the central themes of the poem, they really focus on glory, pride, fate, and wrath. Like it's a very masculine kind of epic. All these detailed descriptions of war instruments and battle tactics. And you've got the Olympian gods featuring as well. They're giving aid to their favored warriors. And
theoretically.
Yeah, well, it was this characterization of the Greek gods in the Iliad. It humanized them. Humanize them for the ancient Greek audience, which helped cement that cultural and religious tradition, you know? So how did we get to this situation? How did this supposed war actually start in mythology? Well, apparently it started with the judgment of Paris, which was this competition between goddesses Aphrodite, Hera, and Athena, and they were basically trying to figure out who is the sexiest of them all. So basically, this other goddess called Eris, the goddess of discord, she writes the fairest on this apple and just fucks it in the middle of them, and they're scrambling over it. They all claim it, and they're looking over at Zeus, and he's like, "Oh, for fuck's sake! Like, you can't be arse dealing with this." He's in an awkward situation, so he's like, "Right, I'll let somebody else choose. How about this guy Paris, this Twinkie Prince of Troy?" So these goddesses, they all try to bribe Paris. They're offering him all this sweet shit. But Aphrodite offered him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, who was Helen of Sparta, believed to be one of Zeus's daughters. And Paris was obviously like, phew, and he chooses her. But plot twist, Helen is married to Menelaus, the king of Sparta, brother of Agamemnon. So Paris takes her to Troy. Menelaus is raging, hooks up with his brother, and they launch 1,000 ships to retrieve Helen. So the actual story of the Iliad begins in the final year of this 10-year war, and it runs up until Achilles kills Hector of Troy in battle, and it ends after Priam, the king of Troy, goes to Achilles begging him to return the body of his son. So if the Iliad ends after the death of Hector, where does this legendary Trojan horse come from? So as legend goes, it was this massive horse made of wood that was said to have been used by the Greek army to secretly enter the city of Troy, going behind enemy lines to then ambush the city and win the war. Now, it is briefly mentioned in the Odyssey. However, the primary ancient source of the Trojan horse comes from the Aeneid. Am I saying that right?
The Iliad, is it
the
not?
The Iliad, anyway.
I would not know.
But yeah, that was by the ancient Roman poet Virgil.
Apparently, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that like the Iliad was just because like the Roman emperor at the time wanted, like, because they were such stans of the Greeks, like, you know, they modeled their armor on the Greeks. They fucking loved it.
They built the Pantheon. And Parnathlon.
Yeah, they were massive weebs for the Greeks. And apparently the Iliad was just like, I want my own. It was like the emperor wanted his own version of the Iliad, and it was just complete fantasy again. Like, it was
the Romans were the ultimate tourists. They just brought back everything from everywhere they went, just made it their own kind of thing, you know.
But also, like,
all great empires do.
It's also kind of like, you know, we credit the Greeks with like inventing all this shit, and like, you know, it's like the cradle of Western democracy and everything. But like, they stole loads of shit from like Egypt You know, like it's just I think it's like a modern or like a relatively modern kind of like racist thing where we were like, you know, we were all like scrambling around in the mud before the Greeks, but then they came along and like set us on the right path or whatever. Like, did they They stole it from the like Library of Alexandria and stuff.
Yeah, that shit. It was destroyed. Like, obviously, but do we know when it was destroyed?
I'm not sure, but like
that was meant to have everything in it. Like, it was meant to be sick.
Yeah, so like there was like quite an advanced civilization relative to the time before the Greeks in Egypt, but we just don't like to talk about that because they weren't white. So it's like you know, it's like it doesn't, but like that just doesn't really work for our narrative. I
was gonna say,
you know, it's like if you, it's like you're imagining like the great minds of the era being like, yeah, that just doesn't work for our narrative. in our story,
not my tempo.
Yeah. In our story, things happen a little bit differently.
Rushing or were you dragging?
Anyway,
Roy, any info on the
Library of Alexandria? It existed from around 300 BC to circa 275, which is the Common Era. So that's about 500 years or so.
Right. Okay. But anyway, for me, this period of the early to mid 2000s, it was such an immensely fun time to go to the cinema. Like even that very summer, the summer of 2004 when Troy came out. If you look at all the films that came out within a 3-month space, Shrek 2, The Day After Tomorrow, The Prisoner of Azkaban, Dodgeball, Spider-Man 2, Anchorman, iRobot, Alien versus Predator. It's just such a condensed thing. You're like,
it's all these really epic films.
Yeah. A lot of fun,
Yeah, it was a very fun period.
How would you like to take a break from that fine lead-based paint? This is where the sport of dodgeball was invented in the 15th century by opium-addicted Chinamen.
Dodgeball is a sport of violence, exclusion, and degradation.
The Iliad details how Odysseus commanded the horse to be constructed and filled with a select unit of warriors. So they leave this wooden horse at the gates of Troy, pretend to sail away while the Trojans bring this sweet horse in and celebrate. However, when night falls, the Greeks exit the horse, open the gates for the Greek army, which returned under cover of darkness. Greeks get in, sack the city, win the war. I was thinking, imagine being inside that fucking wooden horse with all these Greek boys, like for hours and hours, like someone drops a big moussaka fart or something. Oh my god,
Horrible.
Now,
you know the way there used to be condoms called Trojan, like presumably,
still is,
but presumably based on that. But like, have you ever thought about it? Like, surely that's a terrible name. Like, that's exactly the opposite of what you're trying to do. Like smuggling the. It's for like people who want an excuse to get their ex pregnant or something. Like, the only condom that fails 100% of the time or something.
Yeah, you want to be named after something that's famously survived the siege.
Yeah.
Now, it's also thought that perhaps the story of the Trojan horse has come from poets misunderstanding an actual siege engine used at Troy. Perhaps it was described as being akin to a horse in shape, because like animal names or attributes would often be used for military machinery back in the day. Like some argue that the Trojan horse may have actually been a ship, and this is because the terms that were used to put men in the horse are the same as those used by ancient Greek authors to describe men embarking on a ship. Right? With ships.
It could also be like a battering ram or something for the gates.
Yeah. But even like the ships were also called seahorses in the Odyssey.
Okay.
What's it in The Simpsons? In The Simpsons, who's playing the Trojan leader?
Yeah. Oh, I forget.
And he collects large wooden animals as a thing.
I forgot about that actually.
I can't remember fully, but it's good. He's like, a horse. I don't have one of those yet.
He's a huge courtyard of animals. There's also an even more speculative theory that the Trojan horse was actually an earthquake that destroyed the walls of Troy, with the idea of the horse relating to Poseidon, who along with being god of the sea, was also the god of horses and earthquakes. Now, what about the historical Trojan War? What do we know or not know about that?
Well, I think in general we don't know very much about Troy. I think it's very important to establish much of this, if not all of this, doesn't have any actual historical standing. It comes from a poet and it's a myth.
Yeah.
So there's your man Heinrich Schliemann.
Oh, wow.
Was a German who was absolutely convinced that
Oh,
Troy...
no shit. Heinrich Schliemann.
was absolutely convinced that Troy happened, and he spent his life trying to find the site of Troy. And
Was he a Nazi by any chance?
I think it's a wee bit earlier.
Was it one of those like you know the way the Nazis were like as satirized in Indiana Jones, they're always looking for like a Wunderweapon. Like, off looking in the middle of nowhere for like the Ark of the Covenant or whatever.
Basically, he narrowed it down. Your German guy, Schielmann, to a site in Turkey. And through archaeological digs, they found numerous layers and they've named them different numbered Troys that I have. So the Troy that we're talking about in the movie, Troy, is what, Troy 7, like the 7th layer.
Right.
And
Sure.
there's nowhere anywhere that's written this was like, it doesn't say Troy anywhere. It doesn't say anything about a horse. It doesn't say anything about Achilles. It doesn't say anything about Helen, about any of these major characters. Doesn't have an historical basis.
Well, according to Wikipedia, I don't know what that says, but like
it's always a skeptical phrase, according to Wikipedia.
yeah, I know. Sometimes more than others, but apparently the Troy where they think is Troy is like almost directly across from Greece in Turkey.
It is.
Site, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and then but like if you look on there, like the picture of the walls don't look particularly impressive. You know, like I'm sure they were much higher, obviously, but even still, they don't look particularly impressive.
We get more from, there's also Hittite records which is obviously an ancient people called Hittites, yeah.
I think Agamemnon references them in the movie.
I think you're absolutely right. They reference a city called Walusa, which many scholars believe to be Troy, but it's not called Troy. It all seems to be very... I think it's very obvious that I don't believe this, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm definitely coming down from that side. But as an interesting story, what Homer wrote, I've got the impression that the gods being such a big part of it, Athena helping to build the Trojan horse, this all seemed to be such a massive part of the myth. And then the film comes in and almost whitewashes all of that, takes all the gods out of it to make it seem more historically accurate. Yeah, and then what it does, it makes it not historically accurate at all.
They take a realist approach.
But I kind of like that though, like
a romantic approach, and they take a throw in some incredibly good looking stars and make a blockbuster approach. It doesn't ring true to a historical film that I'd like to see or to an epic film I'd like to see. It's not taking
there's way too many ginger and blonde people for a start. Like there would have been like 0 presumably. What
age is Brad Pitt in it?
Oh, he's young, like he's been in his 30s, like.
Well, I'm pretty sure Achilles is like 20. So even that in itself, like he's this mature Achilles rather than this wonder kid that he was, or that he was written to be. You know,
I mean, he could plausibly be like 28, maybe. I don't know.
And like Orlando Bloom is so pretty.
Orlando Bloom is the twinkiest guy in the world,
and
he's a Chalamet of his day.
Yes,
and he's the good guy for stealing Agamemnon's wife. In the Bronze Age, Greece was at war with many different peoples. We've seen it in many different films, like 300.
Yeah, Persia.
Yeah, but 300 as a film is almost more. Not more accurate, but more believable, more true to what it is, because you're getting a more accurate representation.
Are you sort of saying
of the
they
Spartans.
should have just had the gods in it and just
absolutely.
instead of going for that realist approach?
Stick to the text, you know, because the text has been a classic for years. That was
a lot of the criticism they get at the
time.
See,
I quite like what they did with it, because it's like, you know, none of those historical films are historically accurate, like as we've discussed with Napoleon or Gladiator or whatever. But like, it makes a good film. Yeah, you know, it would be sillier if there was, you know. Well, I mean, it would just be like Game of Thrones if there was gods and stuff in it. But
I think where I fall down on Troy is that I mentioned this to you just before we started recording this. I never watched this as a child. I've watched it 3 or 4, maybe 5 times now, and not enjoyed it any of the times. Whereas I think if I watched it as a boy when it came out in 2004. And the war, like that, like even that opening stab in the neck, you're like, oh, that's so cool. That's not badass. That's not doing it for me now, you know.
Even me at 31 years old was like,
no. To be fair, the fight scenes were phenomenal. Like the duels are very good. I have to say.
It's a film I maybe would have liked to have seen earlier, but being interested in history and being the film does not tick any boxes for me. So it doesn't. But yes, there were plenty of wars going on. Greece fought everybody around them, and theoretically there was a place named Troy that was at war with Greece, and there's evidence in the layers of Troy.
Yeah, there was a site that had been destroyed over and over again,
being the thing. And so, like, being so long ago in the Bronze Age, there's just not really anything to take from that and say this actually happened. You know?
Yeah,
and
absolutely not.
And
there's no such thing as, like, in Homer's Odyssey, there's like sirens and stuff.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
obviously that doesn't exist.
So if we're going to do that, I say treat it as a fantasy. And which I'm more than up for a fantasy. So I really enjoy fantasy, but I don't enjoy fantasy masquerading as history.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I totally get that.
And I think that's maybe why I've fallen down on this film.
Well, speaking of the film, we'll move on to the film now. So I did find this little story, which is a good place, I think, to start off with. So you have this guy called Harry Cohen. He was the head of Columbia Pictures during the 30s and 40s. He was actually the inspiration behind the character of Waltz in The Godfather.
Oh my God, yes.
He had ties with organised crime and was known for being a Tinseltown tyrant with his sexual exploitation of actresses. And let me be even more frank. He was described as crude, foul, uneducated, and abrasive, and that was on his best behaviour. Cohen found out about a story called the Iliad, and he demanded a one-page treatment from a group of writers on his desk the next morning. When he got the treatment, he was doubtful, reportedly saying, "There's an awful lot of Greeks in this." So, fast forward 60, 70 years, Gladiator comes out in 2000, and we see this revival of the sword and sandal genre in films and television. You know, productions such as King Arthur, Alexander, the HBO series Rome, and of course, Troy.
And the ill-advised Robin Hood with
Russell Crowe,
yeah. Which was like... It was like a prequel. It was like setting itself up for a sequel that never happened.
Yeah. So David Benioff, who at this stage he's an industry newcomer, he was working on a screenplay of an adaptation of the Iliad. Enter Wolfgang Petersen, German filmmaker best known for his World War II submarine film Das Boot. He also directed In the Line of Fire, Air Force One.
Oh, wow. I knew I recognized him from somewhere.
Yeah, Wolfgang, he was never known for being a groundbreaking filmmaker, more of a reliable guy, you know, somebody who could handle a big budget adventure film and get the job done. You know, he was like the go-to guy for Warner Brothers, a company man.
Yeah. Like you can really see that. Like, in my opinion, it's like a competent film. Like, it moves along quite quickly. Like, it didn't feel... I watched the director's cut last night, 3 hours, 15 minutes. It did not feel like 3 hours, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, I've watched 2-hour films that have been more of a drag.
Yeah.
So, like, the pacing is good, but, like, at times, I was like, Jesus Christ. Beforehand, before we started recording, Rory said it was a bit shallow.
Yeah.
My God, is it shallow? Like, at the amount of times where they have this pointless, repetitive conversation about like your name echoing through history and stuff. I was like, by like the 5th or 6th time, I was like, shut the fuck up! Shut up!
I got near the end of it and I thought, this must be nearly over here. And I've hit the wee button to see how much we left. I was at like 48 minutes and I thought, what are they going to do with this time?
Yeah. See, I like enjoyed it for what it was, but at the same time, there was multiple moments where I was like,
I got to stage where I was ready for bed and I just had to power through to the end of it.
Yeah, so before getting Troy, Wolfgang, he was eyeing up a Batman versus Superman film based
Why?
Should have done that.
Oh, it was an early one. It was based on that Dark Knight Returns graphic novel.
God, should have done that.
Which is great, and it was bastardized by that guy. Zack Snyder.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? Anyway,
fucking.
And this was before superhero films would become the dominant market in Hollywood. This would have been around the time you had Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films coming out with Tobey Maguire.
Yeah.
Unimpeachably good.
Oh, brilliant.
Very, very good.
So Wolfgang, he would end up meeting up with David Benioff and they hit it off. So Wolfgang had to choose between Batman vs. Superman and Troy. While Troy was also being offered to Christopher Nolan, who at this stage, he'd just done Memento and Insomnia. Warner Brothers...
That would have been so much better. Oh my God.
Well, Warner Brothers, they were hesitant because they weren't sure if a young Nolan would be better at handling a film like Troy. And Wolfgang, he had previously been offered the opportunity to direct Gladiator and turned it down, which he would live to regret. So when he was offered the chance to do an adaptation of the Iliad, he would accept it. So Batman vs Superman put on the shelf, and instead Nolan was offered a fresh take on a Batman film, which would become Batman Begins. Pre-production begin.
What are you
Sorry, the
looking
dog
at?
just...
It's like he's just seen a ghost.
Well, Marty and Marty. What's up?
What are you doing?
Anyway.
Yeah, let's move on.
Anyway. So pre-production began, and Brad Pitt, he was interested in playing Achilles, and he would meet with Wolfgang at a German restaurant. And when Brad arrived, he'd been preparing for another film that never got made, and he had this long, dirty beard and scraggly hair. He'd lost a lot of weight. So Wolfgang wasn't sure, but they had a few beers, and Brad sort of assured him,
sweet talked him.
I will be buff and blonde in time for filming, And yeah, Brad pulled it off big time. He spent 6 months getting into shape to look like a Greek statue. Eric Bana would be cast as Hector of Troy, following his breakout performance in the film Chopper. It was a film in which Eric was quite bulky, which also made Wolfgang reluctant, but when he saw the leaner Bana, he quickly changed his mind. Quite funny, actually. Bana, along with the entire male cast, were ordered to shave or wax their chests for the duration of filming. It sounds like Wolfgang was living out some sort of fantasy here,
Yeah, even when you watch something I noticed was the sex scenes. You see the sex scenes? They are so male focused. Like, it's all you're seeing is that ripped back. Like, there's a beautiful woman underneath him.
Yeah.
Which may as well not be there, because all you see is the male physique.
It reminds you a little bit of it's like a version of Tommy Wiseau's The Room. Like the sex scene in that.
And then you got Brian Cox, a classically trained Shakespearean actor. He actively pursued the role of Agamemnon because he'd been dying to do some sort of epic historical film like Troy, and he'd recently been involved in some big films like The Bourne Identity, The Ring adaptation, and X-Men 2.
He's got such a fun performance in it.
Yeah,
it's really, really good.
He plays the role so devilishly fiendish, and you can tell he's having a lot of fun playing that character. Like, right from that opening scene where, you sort of learn, of Agamemnon's taking over most of Greece, and we see these two armies meeting on the field of battle, and Cox goes forward to meet with the opposing general, Julian Glover. Great actor. He was the bad guy in The Last Crusade. The guy who picks the wrong cup. What's happening to me?
He's in loads of shit.
He's Grand Maester Pycelle.
Yeah.
He's also in For Your Eyes Only. Baddie in it. Yeah. And he's got some great, it's a great introduction to how cheesy the dialogue's going to be in this film. Like, you can't have the whole world, Agamemnon. It's too big, even for you.
It was. I was like, I know what I'm in for, and I'm just gonna accept it. But the redeeming features of the film made me put up with that kind of dialogue.
Yeah. But so they make this deal. They're like, instead of letting the armies fight and kill all these men, we'll let their two best men fight. And Cox knows he's gonna win. He has his ace in the hole. He's my dark secret, my elephant man. He's got Achilles. So he calls for him, but he's not even fucking there. So he sends this errand boy to just go fetch him,
Achilles is lying in a hut covered in naked
bodies
women.
everywhere. But he's obviously the closest to the camera.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I found that part quite funny where he's outside the tent with the kid, and the kid's like, he's the biggest man I've ever seen. I wouldn't want to fight him. And Brad Pitt's just like, that's why no one will remember your name. It's like such a mug off. As a child.
I know.
And then when Achilles arrives at the battle, you can see that toxic relationship between him and Agamemnon. It's kind of waning forward in a lot of ways. They need each other for their respective purposes. Agamemnon needs Achilles to win the battles, but Achilles needs Agamemnon to give him a platform for glory. In the form of the battle.
And they really spell this out in a conversation. I think it's with Sean Bean's character Odysseus, where he's he's convincing him to go and fight at one point.
People will talk of this for generations. You bastard.
He's working as Agamemnon's fluffer, basically, like getting him to go along with it.
And so when Achilles gets there, like him and Agamemnon have a bit of like a back and forth, you know, maybe you should fight him, you know. And then there's that guy, I think it's Nestor, his character's called.
Yeah.
He's got a funny line where it's like, you could save thousands of them. Let them go home to their wives.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wife talk in the film, you know. It's like,
the film is like... it definitely wouldn't pass the Bechdel test that we talked about before, because like the women only exist as like pieces of meat. You're like, may the women be on our beds or whatever.
So after that whole intro, we meet Brendan Gleeson, the king of Sparta, who's Agamemnon's brother, and he lives in this really like brutalist palace. It's like carved into the mountainside. Inside there's lots of stone and meat and wine and whoring going on. And Brendan, he comes across as like a very welcoming figure. You know, he's sort of done with war. As he said, you know, may the gods keep the wolves in the hills and the women in our beds.
Yeah.
And he's just your typical dirty bastard. You know, he has this beautiful wife Helen, and all these harpies running around like dancers and all this kind of shit.
Yeah, he's like trying to entreat Eric Bana's Hector into like, he's like, I picked this one out just for you.
He really wants him to do some womanizing. He's like,
yeah.
And like, and he doesn't even think twice about it. It's second nature to him. Whereas Hector,
he's like, what do you mean you're going home to your wife? Like, you know, like what's that?
He says, my wife waits for me, and Gleason's like, well, my wife waits for me right there.
It's like, it's not cheating if it's a different area code.
And she's had enough of his shit, but she can't really do anything about it. She's trapped in this husk of a marriage, and she buggers off only to be followed by Paris.
Or is kidnapped.
Well,
I mean, I was thinking that like
they make it like a Romeo and Juliet
the
film.
But stolen wife, you've got a right to be a bit annoyed and maybe cause a war.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think there's an argument to be made based on what's in the film that she has like manipulated Paris because he's this like young, naive twink.
Impressionable.
And she's like,
I didn't think about that.
This is I'm not saying this is how it's presented in the film, but I'm saying this could be another interpretation of it, because she's obviously like, I'm in this loveless husk of a marriage. Here's my fucking exit ticket. I'll go and be the princess of Troy, and I just have to like lead on this little fucking twink, and you know, he'll take me with him, and it's like, really, you know, all I have to do is play a little bit hard to get, and he'll be like falling over himself.
Overly romanticized. Marriage was not marriage back then.
Marriage it's an alliance.
Ownership.
Yeah.
And somebody stealing one of your possessions is rightful
every
cause.
Right to go to war.
But at the same time, in the film, it's very much, she loves
I love her.
She loves him, and she's away.
Is there a bigger simp in history than Paris? Like the ultimate guy who puts puts hose before every single bro in his homeland. And even when he's like, even when they burn my body, I'll still love you. Hey man, you've known her for 3 days.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know.
And he's really funny.
Slow down.
He's a complete wee fanny, like crawling along the ground. Help me.
But like, after all
no
that,
honor.
I mean, look, can you blame him? The Queen has big naturals. Like, I don't know how common that a thing that is back in those days.
Very true.
You know what I mean? Here, also that scene where he like creeps off up the stairs to see her.
That's what I was gonna say. Actually, it's like he goes up there, obviously, to see her. And he goes in and he's like, I almost feel, in my head, he like slams like a lock on the door, but I don't think it actually happened.
No, it doesn't.
You learn that they've been like at it for a few nights now. She's like, you should leave. But she's being really coy. She's like, you need to leave. You know,
she's like, you need to leave while like taking her clothes off.
Don't look at me.
It's like, what about last night? That was a mistake. And the night before, another mistake. Kiss me.
That's it. Then the next day, they're sailing back to Troy, and there's one of my funniest bits of dialogue for me personally in the film. I nearly died. It's the one where Orlando Bloom goes up to Hector and he's like, Poseidon has blessed our voyage, and then Harris is like, sometimes the gods bless you in the morning and curse you in the afternoon.
I quite liked that.
It's hilarious. I loved it. Yeah.
Also, I don't know which scene it is. I don't know whether it's whenever they get back to Troy or not, or the first. Because is it the very start? Do they have sex like before they leave? And then
there's a scene where like she's lying on the bed.
And
you see Orlando Bloom, and it's like literally right above his cock.
That's what I was gonna say. Like,
you see his
developing the theme that we were talking about earlier on with Wolfgang Petersen. It's like the lowest you could possibly get the cut off.
So oily,
and he's
he's meant to be sweat, but it's like baby oil.
And he's also like the biggest twink ever. Like it's like verging on child pornography. Like he has the body of like a 16-year-old boy.
Yeah. That's it. So this is where Paris sort of reveals to Hector he's taken Helen, and like again he's simping it up, you know.
Yeah.
And Hector's like, no, like if you do this, everyone will die.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think he also sort of knows by now it's
too late. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
inevitable.
Yeah.
War is inevitable now.
Yeah, he's like, we've got to turn around, and then he's like, nah,
Actually,
fuck it. Yeah.
Now, the trickiest casting would actually come for the role of Helen of Troy, whose beauty sparks the Trojan War. Petersen had actually originally said that he didn't even want Helen to appear in the film, which actually ties into what we've just been talking about. Like, all these oiled up dudes. I don't even want her in the film. Nah, forget about that. The most beautiful woman in the world. No, fuck that.
Yeah.
But no,
you only ever see her from behind with clothes on or something.
He claims he felt nobody could live up to expectations. So who'd they consider? Nicole Kidman, Halle Berry, Keira Knightley, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Jennifer Lopez as well at the same time.
Keira Knightley would have been better.
No,
I would
man.
have seen Jennifer Lopez
I disagree.
in Troy.
That would be good. No, I'm going to take...
Out of all of them, my favourite's Catherine Zeta-Jones.
No, I'd say Keira...
Big fan.
Keira Knightley.
Big,
I think
big fan.
Keira Knightley suits a period role at times. If she'd
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah. But I still think that
pretty. What's on Love Actually?
How pretty I am. Pirates of the Caribbean is actually a film. When I was speaking to Megan last night, that I compared with Troy because it's one of these other ones. It doesn't have. It doesn't have a historical basis in the same way, but it's set in a sort of quasi-historical time period, and it's.
I think Curse of the Black Pearl was the same year. Actually, it came out 2004. As far as I remember. Yeah.
We're supposed to be busy doing that.
I do think that the decision they made was very good.
A young
Diane Kruger is fucking beautiful.
Looks. It's just I would prefer to see Keira Knightley in that part.
Yeah.
Thousands of women were auditioned.
But then, like, you can't have like Brendan Gleeson and like, you definitely can't have Brad Pitt as Achilles. You know what I mean? As we mentioned earlier.
I didn't enjoy Brendan Gleeson. I really liked Brendan Gleeson, but I didn't enjoy him in this because his accent's wild.
But they're all just doing their normal accent.
Nobody has a Greek accent, but Brendan Gleeson definitely doesn't.
Yeah.
Like Brendan Gleeson,
he's got an Irish accent.
I've got some excellent accents lined up. So thousands of women were auditioned before they met German actor Diane Kruger, who they fell in love with her as a person, and she was cast as Helen.
Thousands.
Allegedly. Yeah, allegedly.
Some job.
Allegedly. You'll know Diane Kruger from...
It's a film. They've got a huge budget.
Yeah. You'll know her from Inglourious Bastards as Bridget von Hammersmark, the actress who was strangled by Tarantino. So when Menelaus, he goes to Agamemnon to persuade him to go to war with Troy in order to get his wife back. Agamemnon accepts, and when they embrace, you see this like glint in his eye. Like it might as well be dollar signs.
Yeah.
Like,
ding, ding, ding,
the
ding,
riches of Troy, you know. He doesn't give a shit about his brother's wife or a situation. He just needed any excuse.
Yeah.
Troy, you know?
Yeah, he was like, God damn it, we just signed a pact with them. You know, like he was like cursing the pact.
Yeah.
Briefly, you mentioned Menelaus. She survives the whole Iliad, so she does that. It does not die like in the film. He does not die like in the film. And but that's
it is good though in the film.
He survives the mythology, the story. Oh, okay. So they
got the
both
gender completely wrong there.
Hector kills him so easily as well.
2024 guy, who knows? So they both know they're going to need Achilles, and they know only one man who can convince him. Odysseus, played by the great Sean Bean. Like, Roy, did you not see the director's cut?
No, I did not.
You missed probably the best scene of the director's cut, which is where these two soldiers are sent to Ithaca to find Odysseus, and they're going up this hill near the coast, and it's just, you see Sean Bean, he's sitting there, like he's just wearing like peasant kind of garb.
He's wearing like rags.
He's like a shepherd. He's got like goats and his dog with him. And they go up like, we seek Odysseus. And he's, it turns out he is him, but he's just like chilling at home in Ithaca.
Yeah, and fucking with them. Yeah, like with his big, huge lurcher.
Yeah. I love that they've just got Sean Bean to play Sean Bean. Like, he might as well be Richard Sharp. You know what I mean?
Or fucking Boromir at the start of Lord of the Rings.
Like I said, they say to him, it's like, we're looking for Odysseus. And he's just like, that bastard drinks my wine and never pays. It's just so Sean Bean. I love it. And there's a part where they sort of tell him about the wars happening, and the line he says is, "I'm gonna miss my dog." Not his wife.
Yeah.
I love that. No, they had
when you have an arranged marriage sometimes.
Now, they had initially planned to shoot most of the film in Morocco. However, the war in Iraq was pending at this stage, and there were threats of terror attacks from Al-Qaeda. So one of the filming locations was changed to Mexico. The city of Troy itself would be built on Malta, which is an island just south of Sicily, at Fort Ricasoli. Construction took about 3 months, and this location had actually previously been used in Gladiator as well. This was going to be a monumental task to film, shooting on location in both Malta and Mexico. You have a star-studded cast of Brad Pitt, Peter O'Toole, Brian Cox, Sean Bean, Orlando Bloom, Brendan Gleeson, Julie Christie, many more recognizable faces, on top of thousands of extras.
Why shoot in Malta and Mexico rather than Greece and Turkey?
Good question, Rory. That's one for Wolfgang Petersen to answer.
I mean, they do this all the time. It'll be cheaper or something, probably.
Yeah, that's probably it.
So you have this huge budget, all these people working on it, all these box office sensations on set. Things could have blown up at any minute. So they all arrive on Malta to start filming, and word starts to spread about the big stars in town, and the paparazzi went crazy. At this stage, Brad Pitt, he is insanely popular at this stage of his career, and he's the talk of all the paps.
So you think you're Brad Pitt?
He's also at he's also at this point married to Friends star Jennifer Aniston. So everywhere they go, they are hounded by the paparazzi. They're like the power couple of that time, you know? So it would have been absolute chaos. And you've also got Orlando Bloom, who is Hollywood's latest heartthrob, following his breakout role in The Lord of the Rings. And the paparazzi, they even flew helicopters over the set just to get photos of Brad Pitt. There's one photo somewhere of Brad Pitt in his full, Trojan, whatever, regalia, Greek regalia, his uniform, using his wee Nokia mobile phone. Really good. But making this movie on location, it meant bringing along 300 big jacked Bulgarian extras to Mexico, where they would be trained for the battle scenes, so that the Greeks and Trojans would look European. You know, they would also bring allegedly any European-looking Mexicans closer to the camera. This all meant that so think about this. So you've all these English people, Bulgarian people, Spanish people. So they're all being given different instructions in all these different languages on set. It'd be madness. You and I have worked as extras. It's chaotic enough at the best of times, especially in a big production. So it'd be madness. And there's some massive, huge battle sequences in the film, and they are well executed in terms of the scale and getting us close to the action. If we look at that the beach landing sort of sequence where they're arriving at Troy, and the ships are coming in, they see Achilles' ships way far ahead. And
he wants to keep all the glory for himself.
He's going to take the beach of Troy with 50 men. And at the same time, Hector, he's gathering his men at the front of Troy to go meet the Greeks. They're outside the gates, and he's such a hilarious line. Was it
the pep talks before the battle are fucking hysterical.
All my life I've lived by a code, and that code is simple: honor the gods, love your woman, and defend your country.
It's like Mike Bassett, England manager.
It's so funny.
Yeah, the writing, I assume the good parts are lifted directly from the Iliad or whatever, and then the rest is fucking awful.
Whenever Achilles is nearing the shore, he's getting his fucking, what do you call them, merman or whatever,
the myrmidons,
the myrmidons or something. He's getting them all pumped up. He's like, brothers of the sword, we are lions.
Yeah. There's a reprise of that later on in the film whenever they're whenever he's it's when he's talking with Hector, and he's like, there are no pacts between lions and men.
For me, the most cringe line in that whole part was where it's do you know what's there waiting beyond that beach? Immortality. Take it. It's yours. And he's pointing his sword. He does twist. It's really camp.
I know.
He's pouting like fuck.
There's a bit where Eric Bana, I can't remember, it's around that time where Eric Bana says to someone, I'll rip your pretty little face off your pretty little head. It's that's the most camp insult I've ever heard. Bana's performance is very strange as well, especially at the start.
I do love him in it though.
I like him. Like he grew on me throughout the film, but like there were certain scenes at the start where I was like, "What the fuck
He's
is
the one
going
guy
on?"
in the film I would fight for.
I mean,
Eric Bana is an honourable man.
to be fair, Achilles' philosophy in the first half of the film is pretty solid, and then he goes completely off the rails at one point.
So you have that whole like the beach landing sequence, that battle, and once it's sort of settled, the Greeks, they've taken the shore and they've raided this temple, and they've taken the cousin,
killed all the priests,
and they've taken the cousin of Hector and Paris, Rose Byrne, who plays Briseis.
Yeah, something like that.
I've seen Byrne things as
Here,
well.
is it just something that they cut from the film, but like the rationale for why they're like galloping down the beach to get to the temple, is that to like rescue her? You know, the way Eric Bana has like a group of guys, but there's not like a huge amount of them, and they're just like running down to the temple.
Oh, right, yeah. I think they're
like
just trying to,
presumably
like, get to the closest point to try and defend or something.
Yeah, I know. I thought that was strange. I was like, why are they bothering? Basically, like they've just got fucked on the beach with like a small force to try and stop them from landing when they've got like thousands of ships, or like 1,000 ships, and then he brings a load of cavalry down to the temple, and they all get slaughtered by Achilles' men.
So that's it, Achilles, and he takes your woman Briseis as his prisoner. But then, as things move on, Agamemnon basically snatches her away from him. And Achilles, he cracks up, and this is where Achilles and Agamemnon have their big fallout, which is the central conflict of the Iliad.
Yeah.
You have that whole scene, was it in Agamemnon's tent, where he calls him, "You sack of wives."
Yeah.
One of the best lines in the film.
Yeah, is that I think that's like, is that after he tells him that he's like given her to the men as like
maybe around that time,
as like a piece of meat, and I think that's what makes him snap.
Yeah.
But there's a great line during that bit where he like points at Agamemnon, and he's like, "Before my time is done, I will look down on your corpse and smile." And I was like, that is fucking great writing. Yeah.
So following that, Achilles basically refuses to fight in the siege of Troy as an act of protest. And the next sort of big battle scene you get is at the part of the gates where it's sort of going to be the siege of Troy, but you got Agamemnon and Brendan Gleeson. They meet Hector and Paris between both armies. And they have this sort of back and forth, Hector's sort of calling out Agamemnon on his shit, brought to fight for one man's greed. No son of Troy would submit to a foreign ruler. And is that, was it Cox like, then every son of Troy will die. You can tell he's having so much fun. Fiend in this film, And then was it Paris? He offers to like personally duel Menelaus in exchange for Helen. Like, oh, you'll spare the city and I'll give your wife back. And Agamemnon sort of just like, he humors his brother, but he's gonna try and take the city regardless.
Yeah. He's like, have your fun, and then we'll attack the city.
Yeah. So they have that duel, and Menelaus kicks his ass, and as we said earlier, Paris ends up he's about to be killed, and he crawls back to the actor like, "Oh, help me!"
I feel bad for Troy. Like, are Troy supposed to be like the victims here, or like,
well, they are the underdog.
The way the narrative presents it,
Why are they being so provocative then? Like, why?
I don't understand how they are though.
But it's only Paris.
And why did not just give Helen back?
I think
silence Paris.
But they know it's too late. Like they know
Hector knows his brother will die no matter what.
Yeah, and they know
Hector not just let Paris die.
Because he knows. Because he knows. Because he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to see his brother die.
Would you let me die?
In that situation, in war, it is the honourable thing to do.
Fuck honour! Come on,
run away to the card.
No, he doesn't want to see his brother die, but he also is smart enough to know Agamemnon and how he operates, and he knows he's not going to come all this way without fucking sacking the city. I think that's what it's about. Like, he knows.
I think you do everything in your power to stop it.
I think no matter what, Agamemnon will find a way to justify it in the end.
Where there's a will, there is a fucking will.
I find myself lacking sympathy for the Trojan
fair
cause.
Play.
Not that the Greeks were the good guys. I didn't think anybody was the good guys, but I didn't find myself feeling bad for
there are no
either
good guys
Paris
in war,
or Hector. I thought they were both
There is no good in war.
Yeah, no, like it's not. I don't think there's meant to necessarily be good guys, but like they're more sympathetic because they're the underdog, and because like Agamemnon is this like crazy imperialist.
It is confusing in a way because the way it's shot, it's very much like, oh, here's the hero kind of thing, But then it's all very mixed up.
Yeah, but then like Achilles is also like the hero for some of it as well. But whatever.
Yeah,
like
it's mixed.
The way I would describe it is that like everyone other than Hector and Achilles is like a submental buffoon. But essentially, that's how they're presented in the film. Anyway.
Yeah. See, when Paris flees back to Hector, he has a confrontation with Menelaus, and then he's killed by Hector, which violates the duel basically. And Agamemnon, he goes crazy. He orders the Greeks to charge, crush the Trojans.
Yeah.
And the battle's an absolute disaster for the Greeks.
Yeah.
You see Achilles is up on the hill, like marching back and forward, like sort of shouting what he would do.
Yeah.
Like a coach at the side of the pitch.
Yeah.
And I found that whole battle, it's really good. But there's one part in it, we were talking about the accents earlier. There's one guy in it, he's a Trojan soldier. You would know him probably from Braveheart the most. He's called James Cosmo. And he was also in Thrones. He was the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch in the early seasons of Thrones.
I love him. He's great.
I love him. He might as well have been played by Billy Connolly.
Oh, yeah.
He finds Hector on the battlefield, and he's bringing his horse, and he literally goes, Prince Hector!
Oh, I mean, like, you get a bit of that from Brian Cox as well as Agamemnon. There's a really funny line where I was like, that is fucking fantastic, where he's like puffing himself up and talking about how great he is and about how he's like forged a nation out of the like warring city-states of Greece or whatever. And he's like, I built a nation out of fire worshippers and snake eaters. It really made me laugh.
That's brilliant. So following that battle, Achilles, he ends up hooking up with your woman, and then he sort of decides, right, I'm going to leave Troy. And his cousin, who's been here this whole time, Patroclus, he's sort of like his protege at the same time. He's pissed off about that, basically.
Yeah. Another twink.
Another twink.
And a really shit name.
Patroclus.
So, and then at the same time, Priam, the king of Troy, he's being like, to Hector, you need to go and fucking attack these Greeks, get them off my fucking beach.
Yeah.
And Hector's like, nah, just fucking relax.
The council meetings in Troy are fucking hysterical. You got like the top general who's like, yep, we can do it, like anything, like no problem. Like we've like the walls have never been breached. Like we have a certainty of winning. Yeah. And then you've got like the high priest who's like, this morning I saw a vision of an eagle with a snake in its talons. It is surely a sign from the gods that we cannot lose. And then Hector is like, you fucking like shut the fuck up. Hector is like, you're all stupid. Like this is the obvious best course of action. Yeah. And then his father, the king, is just like, the gods have spoken.
Yeah, the gods. The way Peter O'Toole says, the gods.
Yeah.
I'm not the son of the gods. It gets worse every time.
Yeah.
But so eventually Hector submits to his father's will, and he takes the army down. They like sort of surprise attack the Greeks at the beach. Like
it's very like in Lord of the Rings where Denethor goes mad and gets Faramir to attack Osgiliath.
Definitely,
it's a wee bit like that.
Yeah.
Like no hope in it.
Yeah. But like it starts off really well. Like that would be fucking terrifying. The bit where they're like rolling the burning
that was very cool.
balls down the hill at them.
That was something I did like in the film. I was like, fuck, all our arrows are falling short. And then these big balls. Although I don't understand why the balls were exploding. I don't understand, like the balls were on fire, but why were they exploding? What was the?
I mean, I guess it's like like they'll be like
Ouzo.
Yeah, they've like saturated it with ouzo, so then whenever it hits something, it's just gonna burst into because it's just a big ball of hay or something that's been covered in tar or something. That is what would happen.
No, I don't know if it'd be just as explosive.
It's like a car explosion. But yeah, Hector, he ends up dueling a man he believes to be Achilles, but he ends up killing him only to discover it was actually Patroclus. And Yeah, both armies, they agree, like, let's not fight for, it's like, not for a day or something like that.
Yeah. I think it's Odysseus is like, there's been enough for one day or something.
There's been enough bastard killing for one day.
Yeah. Or is it Hector? It doesn't matter, but...
Yeah. And so then when Achilles finds out, he obviously vows revenge, basically, for the killing of his cousin. And that leads you up to sort of that duel scene. Now, for that epic duel between Achilles and Hector, Brad Pitt and Eric Bana didn't use any stunt doubles. In doing so, they made this sort of gentleman's agreement to pay for any accidental hits. It worked out $50 for a light blow and $100 for a hard blow. And in the end, Brad would end up owing Eric $750. Eric would owe Brad Pitt nothing.
Unreal.
Yeah.
There was one thing I was going to mention just before we move on. In the first battle where Ajax gets killed by Hector.
Oh, yeah.
This is like a recurring thing throughout the movie. Like, Peter O'Toole's performance is so funny because he's like watching from on high.
Yeah.
And whenever Hector kills Ajax, it looks he's about to bust a nut. Like, he looks like constipated or something as well.
Speaking of watching from on high, for that duel, they actually built the Wall of Troy, from which the royalty, watched the fight from above, and it cost about $1 million to build that actual wall.
Jesus.
Once they built it, they found out there was a major Hurricane Marty, heading within in a couple of days, and they ended up having to abandon the set. The hurricane destroyed the entire set.
Oh my god.
Tents that held all the costumes and props disappeared, so they had to build another wall, make all this other shit. And while the cast was given time off during this, Brad Pitt would injure his Achilles tendon, which pushed something back even further. And Petersen basically said you couldn't imagine how much it cost. That hurricane,
Why did the wall cost $1 million and it still wasn't fit to stand?
I don't know. Everything's like really expensive to build, I guess.
Surely getting a proper wall built would have been cheaper than a prop wall.
You would be fucking surprised, man, with building materials these days.
But yeah, so obviously, the two of them.
I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt you. There's a guy walking around in Mexico with like a full Achilles costume that's just like landed in his garden.
So yeah, the two of them, obviously, they duel until Hector is killed and Achilles drags his corpse back to the Trojan beach. Now, yeah, as we said, like the role of King Priam, it was given to the legendary English actor Peter O'Toole, best known for playing T.E. Lawrence in Lawrence of Arabia and King Henry II in both Beckett and The Lion in Winter. Off stage and screen, he was known as being one of the Hellraisers alongside popcorn head favourites Richard Harris, Oliver Reed and Richard Burton. The four men considered to be the greatest drinkers of all time. They drank hard and worked together, and at this stage in life, O'Toole was the last of the Hellraisers remaining. Reed had just died, and Harris had just died following doing the first two Harry Potter films.
Yeah.
So he was the last one remaining.
Peter O'Toole's performance is so funny.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So funny. He's so fiendish whenever he first meets Helen of Troy. He's like,
it's really creepy, isn't it?
Yeah. He's like, "Ooh, the rumors of your big naturals are true."
He's doing that old people thing where they're so handsy.
Yeah.
If you remember,
he's like touching the small of her back like a little bit too low or something.
You ever remember dealing with your granny? They were always so their hands were everywhere. But that leads me on.
For once, the rumors were true.
That's it. The one scene that does really follow the Iliad as closely as possible is when Priam sneaks into the Greek camp to beg Achilles for his son's body following the duel. Achilles, he's treated Hector's corpse with disdain, and it's one of these things, like, it's really drained all the humanity from Achilles as a character. And Priam, he sneaks in, he sort of kneels and kisses the hand of Achilles, saying, "I have endured what no man on earth has endured. I have kissed the hands of the man who killed my son." And this is basically word for word with the Iliad. And this scene, it's so pivotal in the poem. It's the resolution of Achilles' rage and anger. It's sort of like his redemption as a human being.
Yeah.
He sees his own father in Priam, and they sort of weep together because Achilles knows that his father will also soon be bereaved. It's like inevitable.
Yeah.
He's chosen this short life of glory, but with this eternal flame. But here, he now sees the cost of these actions. And obviously he ends up returning the body to Priam. And
he's constantly on the cusp of leaving. He's like, fuck this. It's like a Godfather 3 situation where he's like, every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
And this is, of course, where the poem itself ends, but of course, the film does carry on with, the Trojan horse and the sack of Troy, which comes from the other references we mentioned. Now, when the film was released, O'Toole spoke very negatively of the film and his experience making it. He claimed that he walked out of the film 15 minutes in. At the Savannah Film Festival, O'Toole exclaimed, "Oh, what a disaster. The director, that kraut, what a clown he was."
Oh, that's so funny.
Diane Kruger has talked about how O'Toole was a cruel drunk on set and not pleasant to work with. She talked about how O'Toole was basically frustrated that he could barely make it up a set of stairs. She described him as being very old and very, very drunk.
I bet he was just as creepy off camera as well.
100%, drunk his whole career making amazing films.
Surprise.
You just say, who the fuck are you?
He has real like drunkard eyes in the film as well. Did you notice that?
Absolutely. So a few years after the release, Brad Pitt would also express his own disappointment with the film, basically saying he had to do Troy because he'd pulled out of another film for Warner Brothers. So he had to do something for the studio.
Oh, so he was like locked into a contract to do something.
Yeah. And he would claim that the way the film was being told wasn't how he wanted it to be. He'd been kind of spoiled working with David Fincher on Fight Club, and he became disillusioned while filming Troy, which became a much more commercial sort of film. And it probably also didn't help that Brad had to give up smoking to film Troy, which proved torturous for him at the same time.
Why?
He didn't have vapes. Probably for his fitness, to get in that shape.
Right, okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? I'd imagine that's the reason. Like
people smoked and were fit for years before smoking became a problem.
But not like that. Nobody was jacked like that.
There are plenty of people that are jacked like that and smoke.
Well, maybe nowadays with like steroids and shit.
I don't think that quitting smoking is a valid excuse.
It was probably for like cardio and things like that. Like it would make sense to be like, oh, I may as well get off the fags if I have to get in mental shape.
Yeah.
I think it's weak.
He is in great shape.
Smoker.
I was in the best shape while I was smoking. Since I quit smoking, I've done nothing.
I don't think I've ever had a best shape, right? Anyway, David Benioff, he also came under fire for trying to cram too much into one film, condensing it down so much. But Benioff, he tried to defend himself.
That'll never be a problem that'll dog his career again. No, actually, he was gone by that point. Was he in Game of Thrones?
No. Still with it.
Right.
It was always Benioff and Vice.
Yeah.
It's like across like 10 years in the Iliad, but like squashed into like a year in the movie.
Well, he sort of said he didn't want to do a script that covered the war in its entirety. The Iliad covers one fragment of it. You know what I mean? He didn't want the film to have titles coming up saying 9 years later, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It is a coherent film and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Like it works. But as I said, like probably the director's cut makes more sense than the theatrical one might have been a bit brisk.
Yeah.
Not brisk.
So
maybe the pacing of the theatrical cut makes it worse.
Could very well do,
Like for whatever reason, I thought it flowed really nicely, the director's cut. And also I kept seeing this thing online where they were like, oh, the music that they've changed the music in one of the duels and it's shit now. And I was like, what? It's perfectly fine to me.
There was something to do with like they had an original score, it was shit, so they got another guy to do another one, and then for the director's cut they used music from like other films.
Right.
I think
I knew I recognized music from something else.
Troopers they used like a bit of music from.
Right.
Which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
But anyway, I remember the first time I watched this very well because it was the first time I ever saw a pirated film. This was 2004. Think about how bad that would have been.
Good God.
A real shitty...
like a shitty cam at the back of...
You wouldn't steal a car.
People like walking in front of the camera and stuff.
But a real shitty, sweaty cam. Like the camera like falls over and all, and you got like ASMR of the guy recording it, eating popcorn, farting and all. But it was one of those situations, the age rating meant I couldn't go see it, so this was like the best option to sedate my lust for swords and sandals. Like for me, the film, it feels very much like a throwback to, sword and sandal films, which is this subgenre of film set during classical antiquity, which is the period between the 8th century BC and the 5th century AD. And most of like classic sword and sandal films, they were made by Italians. It was kind of like the spaghetti westerns of antiquity, and they would actually dominate the Italian film industry until the spaghetti westerns came out in the mid-60s. But they were basically trying to emulate the success and popularity of big historical epics at that time, like the Ten Commandments, Ben-Hur, Spartacus, and like those sort of films. And like the Trojan War, it has been incredibly influential in the arts, from paintings to pottery, literature, games. Like it featured in Age of Mythology, the Total War franchise, even music. What about Achilles' Last Stand? Led Zeppelin.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Nice.
Unbelievable song. Fucking class.
There's the outro music right there.
For me, like as a wee boy and still to this day, I have this fascination with this sort of history and like big action, swords, spears, shields, brave warriors, glory, and then there's that mystery of the ancient world, It feels like a film that's really trying to tap into your deep-rooted male desire. It's a very masculine sort of film.
Yeah, it's real like chivalric, like romantic propaganda almost.
Yeah. For me, it's decent. I just think it's a good time. I think it's very entertaining, but most importantly, unintentionally hilarious a lot of the time.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a good time watching it.
Yeah,
but
there's a great line that guy, I forget his name, the one who's the night watch commander. There's a bit near the end where where the Greeks have broken into the city and he's like defending, like the upper keep or whatever, and he says something like, "The boatman waits for us. Let's make him wait a little bit longer," or something.
Yeah, that'll be referencing the River Styx. The man that ferries you across.
Yeah, exactly. The ferryman. Yeah. But Denisa made a good point about the scene where Peter O'Toole comes to visit Achilles, and he's just been talking about how like all the men he's killed, he like sees them when he's asleep on the other side of the River Styx.
They say, "Welcome, brother."
Yeah. But she was saying Peter O'Toole was kind of like an apparition in that scene because it looks like he's so close to death. And it's like almost like he's one of the men from the other side of the river coming to visit him. And it's almost like a Christmas carol. He's like the ghost of Christmas past or something.
There's a mashup I'd love to see.
You have to do a Muppets one. Muppets Troy.
But no, for me, there's a lot to be said for a good old-fashioned fun epic. Like for me, the film feels like a real throwback. And like,
that's what I'm missing from it. So it is, because it doesn't for me. I didn't have that. I didn't watch it when I was that young impressionable age where war was everything and heroes.
See, I did, but I couldn't really remember very much about it other than like the jumping stab thing that we talked about earlier on. But then like when I watched it again, I was like, there's loads of things that annoy me about it, but it is a good film. Like it is. I thought it was fun. I thought it was a good time.
Yeah. Well, if there's anything else you guys want to say about what you think of it, now's the time.
I was just going to say, whenever the Greeks are sacking the city at the end and they're like drop kicking babies into fires and stuff, I was like, fuck, it really makes you understand why like the Geneva Convention post World War II is a thing. And like, you're like, maybe we should get a bit more serious about defending that like charter on human rights because we don't want to go back to that.
Alec Guinness going on about the Geneva Convention.
We will get into that so hard. We're going to do that soon. Oh, mate, can't wait.
Also, I thought it was really funny whenever Orlando Bloom's Paris was like, the way his father gave him the sword of Troy, and he's like, as long as it's in the hand of a Trojan, our people have a future or whatever. And then as he's like shooing them all off to escape the burning city, he just like gives it to some teenager and he's like, here you go.
So that guy, that's a reference to the guy who ends up eventually establishing Rome.
Okay.
What do you call him?
Is it those wee boys that are sucking the teats? Romulus?
No, not Remus and Romulus.
Oh, I have this. Where did it go?
Kids on the Roma flag.
Yeah.
Where the kids on the Roma flag.
It's Aeneas. Aeneas.
Aeneas.
Aeneas.
So anyway, we'll close off here. Talk a little bit about a bit of a contemporary reflection on the Iliad and Troy as a film. I sort of want to try and think about how you got Agamemnon who wants to create this new world order in a lot of ways. And you can compare that a lot with American politics and foreign policy at that time. We're talking, it was being developed in sort of like early 2003, as we said.
In the build up to the Iraq War, right?
Yeah. And like, you could compare this with like Bush, Blair, and the Iraq War. Like,
although Bush didn't have a sweet little horsehair scepter that he was waving around the whole time when he was making his speeches.
Yeah, like much like Agamemnon invaded Troy with the guise of, oh, we're rescuing Helen, but in reality he wanted to expand his empire. You could compare this with the initiation of the Iraq War under George W. Bush. His whole thing was, we need to get rid of these weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's so much to suggest that it was all a ploy to control foreign resources and flaunt the geopolitical dominance of America.
Yeah, well, I mean...
Or am I speaking too frankly?
No, you're absolutely right, because his cabinet is stacked full of neoconservatives who, like, their ideology is basically like the aggrandizement of the American empire. That's why there's like the only countries that hadn't fallen under American power at that point, or like had some sort of relationship with America, were like Iran, North Korea, and Iraq, and they were like the axis of evil.
The axis,
like
axis of terror.
Incredibly convenient. But like, all you have to do is Google. I forget the think tank, but it was one of the neoconservative think tanks. It might maybe the think tank's called this, but it's called like Project for a New American Century.
Yeah,
like there's a reason why they were like rolling out plans to bomb Iran before they'd even started with Iraq,
Yeah, you could compare, with the film, the consequences of conflict, the cost of lives, and particularly the destabilization of different regions, all this unnecessary destruction. And like, if we say Bush is Agamemnon, then Blair has to be Menelaus. Blair was obviously a key ally to Bush in the Iraq War, and he supported this larger power in a military invasion, and he also faced major criticism for his role in the conflict,
In that scenario, who's Helen of Troy?
Bin Laden?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well,
yeah, that makes sense, I suppose.
Who was Bush's
in a
wife?
weird way.
Bush's
Barbara. No, I thought
Is that not
Bush's
his dad?
mom.
Barb. Well, I think that's interesting.
There's some amazing stories about him, like when he was younger, like courting. There's some very funny. I can't remember. Like I don't remember it in enough detail to be able to talk about it, but very funny.
Laura Bush.
Laura Bush. Yeah. There we go.
I wouldn't know that, even looking at her name.
Speaking of, like, whenever they get to Troy and Paris is like, let's run away, I'll hunt for us and stuff. And I was like, dude, come on. Like, she's either actually loves you and like
she's royalty.
Wanted to just, swap out one like oafish husband for like someone younger or whatever, but she still wants the trappings of power. Like, she's obviously not giving that shit up, like dream on.
What if we went down to the stables, took 2 horses and left? Ride east, keep riding.
And go where?
Away from here. I could hunt deer, rabbit, I could feed us.
The bit where Perseus kills Agamemnon is like the only bit that subverts this, but like up until that point, it was like starting to really annoy me, where it seemed like every single hero or royal could only be killed by like their equal and opposite number on the other side. And I was like, this is just getting silly now, you know what I mean? It's like these royals are like godlike heroes who just can't be killed by a mortal. I thought that was a bit silly. But then I was also thinking that like, in those days, presumably because they would have been like men of leisure, they would have had like way more time to train, so they probably actually would have been better than like your average soldier who's presumably having to work all the time or as like a slave or something.
Well, it'd be one extreme to the other. Really good or really fat.
Exactly.
A man of leisure.
Really, really, really fat as a symbol of wealth.
Gluttonous and like it's lying on your chaise lounge.
Grapes by your harem.
I wish I'm going to go home and do that now. Anything else? We all good?
No, I think that's everything.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, thanks very much for joining us again, guys. Thanks for coming back. We've got a good slew of episodes coming your way over the next few weeks, so we'll see you again. Take it easy.
Guys.
See you later, guys.
I'm not asking you to fight for him. I'm asking you to fight for Greece.
Why, have the Greeks tired of fighting each other?